Hello and welcome to the Brazilian BA Guest. I'm receiving different guests every week here to talk about nimble. Nimble is a scalable capability of an organization to sense and respond to change with speed and precision. Today, we are talking with a very good friend of mine, an author of Elegance, Mr. Robert Snyder. Thank you for coming, Robert.
Fabricio, it's a pleasure to chat with you today.
Oh, the pleasure's all mine. Thank you for joining me. We always have a question to start our conversations, as you know. Our question today is being nimble related to mechanics or style? And I wonder if you could start by explaining the difference between mechanics and style and why this is important for organizations to understand their abilities or capabilities of being nimble.
Yeah, love the question, and I think that the terms mechanics and style are valuable because they stratify heads down work from heads up work. The routines, the habits of a team versus elevating from your mechanics into something entrepreneurial or strategic or creative and imaginative. So I believe it's valuable for companies to not take those two for granted and leave them blended casually. Let's distinguish what does it mean to be brilliant at the basics, fabulous at the fundamentals, so that we can elevate our focus into being more strategic and creative. I love the analogy, the metaphor of dancers. And so I don't have the license on the dance floor to be creative and to style until I've mastered my mechanics. And the reverse is painful on the dance floor because if you're all style and no mechanics, your dance partner doesn't know what you're doing. So is that a fair enough analogy for why it's valuable to distinguish mechanics from style for innovation professionals, for BA professionals?
Well, let me see if I understand your analogy. If I say I'm a good dancer, I have the mechanics of a good dancer. That means that I have learned the steps, I have trained it very hardly, and I know all the moves, and I could perform like a robot perfectly, but like a robot,
Mm,
something that
mm,
was trained. That doesn't mean that I could freestyle beautifully, because that's the part of style. So someone who have style, they can create a new dance. That's the difference. It's not just performing a dance that was defined by someone, but creating it. It's another level of abstraction,
yeah.
being able to create. And with creating comes style. So I can reproduce someone else's style if I'm good in mechanics, but I would not be able to create. Uh, it, if I'm bringing that from an organizational perspective, I'm telling that if I learn the mechanics of a methodology, for example, or a method or a practice, I can reproduce it. I can do it again. That doesn't mean I can create my own method or my own way of working.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah. Yeah.
am I following you?
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. In the IIBA report that launched this conversation about Nimble, the report uses terms like institutionalize, technique, skills, execute at scale. This is what brings our teams efficiency, predictability. There's that casual reference to another performing art, singing, making music, when one team member may ask another person, are we singing from the same hymnal? So I'll throw another term in here that I believe uh, tiptoes toward automation, and the term is muscle memory. Athletes may call it, I'm in the zone, I'm a well oiled machine. And so when a team is in the zone, they're in a groove, they've got a rhythm, that is when they can transcend, um, exhibit some style, and back to the term nimble, the the word that I wanted as I read the IIBA report, the word that kept coming back to my mind is surprise. We are here X number of months and years after a pandemic, possibly one of the biggest surprises we have had in our professional lives over the course of our career. So it is valuable to be nimble, to anticipate surprises if and when they happen, so that it is effectively low cost. If I tiptoe into the topic of the economics, how does the money matter to be nimble? Why is it worthwhile? It is to be able to handle surprises with low cost. I love the song Hakuna Matata, right? No worries. So if you are nimble on the dance floor, someone's coming at you. So some other dance couples taking up too much space, but you have muscle memory, and you are not self-absorbed about your steps and your partner's steps. You are able to be attentive to see what else is going on the dance floor, so that surprises are no big deal. And I think that's an important concept behind nimble, is that surprises, it's not a big deal.
Let me
Hakuna,
take
Hakuna
the
Matata.
research here. Hakuna Matata. I like that. Let me see if I don't drop Wally. No, I didn't. So this is the study that you mentioned. Let me show you for those who haven't saw the other episodes of this series. But being nimble, the scalable capability for organizations to sense and respond to change. It was a research created by the International Institute of Business Analysis, where they define the idea of being nimble as a capability, as you were saying. And we are talking about how can an organization sense and respond to change. And you bring those very interesting metaphors like singing, dancing, and I understood that for being able to deal with, you used the word an emergency, something unexpected. What was the word you used?
Surprise?
Surprise. Yes, I like. That's what I understand. IIBA is calling a change, right? Respond to change, respond to a surprise, to something that was not expected, a change.
Yeah.
And this change could come in the market, like a new law, like a new competitor coming, or a new product that's competing with your product. Something is changing, or a pandemic, I don't know. Something is changing in the market, and how can you deal with that? And you're telling me that to be able to be a good dancer or a good singer or something like that, you must at first be sure you are able, or you have the moves, you have the mechanics very well structured in yourself. Otherwise, you won't be able to be nimble. Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah. Another fun way to describe what I thought you were going to say is know the rules so that you can break the rules. That's just another
analogy.
Yeah. It's another phrase that I've heard. You don't get to break the rules if you aren't able to demonstrate that you know the rules in the first place. Don't move the frontier until you've demonstrated you understand and respect the fundamentals, the basics, that you have a solid core.
By the rules that you're saying, that you must know the rules to break the rules, you mean the way? Well, let me try to bring to some specific situation, right? So let's say I have a business and my competitor created a new product, and that's a change happening in my business, right? At first, I don't even know what it is. At first, I don't even know he created the product, right? So for being nimble, I must be able to perceive that something has changed, identify that change, understand what's that new product, how that product impacts my business and my customers and my market, and as a whole. I must be able to evaluate what alternatives, what should I do, and take a decision, and do all those things fast.
Yes.
Right. And not just doing fast is not enough. I must take good decisions.
Yes.
Right? Because just doing fast may not be the best approach if I'm doing the wrong thing.
Right. Agreed.
where do mechanics and style applies into this small story that I told you?
Okay. Well, the word that came to my mind as you were telling that story is transparency. Let's say this emergency situation that you've just described. It's Friday, and I've just learned about a competitor move that I feel threatened by. And perhaps I feel like, okay, I need 10 people, I need 10 employees on Monday to turn attention to this brand new project that we are starting, but I don't know who those 10 people are. I don't know what they're working on right now. I don't know what their workload is. I don't know what their Monday, their plans for next week are already set. So if let's take the situation of me not being nimble. I am not nimble if I have no transparency, no visibility to the existing projects in flight, and the existing workloads of 10 candidates who might be able to start this brand new project on the next business day. So there are two things worth documenting, and we can talk about what's popular and what's unpopular about documentation. If I have the roadmap to understand these are exactly the projects I'm going to pause, and I know who the 10 people are because I know what their workloads are, and I have their status reports, so I know exactly the trade-offs. So because I'm armed with a roadmap and because I'm armed with their status reports and a workload report, I now don't need, because without those, on Monday, when those employees come back into work, I've got to have a meeting with their 10 managers and those 10 people. Suddenly, that's a really expensive way to pivot. The nimbleness to start this new project is very expensive because I need a meeting with 10 people and then another meeting with another 10 people. And instead, if I have that transparency of the roadmap and the transparency of their status reports and their workload report, now it's possible for me to still make that decision on Friday before I leave the office. But that nimbleness isn't free. So let me pause there. Is that a fair example of how transparency and the unpopular documentation for some business analysis professionals is crazy unpopular? I understand, but we just need to acknowledge that being nimble, if you want that low cost, it's not free. And so,
I like it.
because if being nimble was easy, everyone would already be doing it. And why is it not easy? Because it requires discipline before the surprise. And many people are going to say, that's paranoid. That's overkill. I remember, I'm old enough to remember when the city of London built trains around the neighborhood of Canary Wharf, Southeast London. And there was a lot of negativity because it was seen, the trains around Canary Wharf were seen as overkill. Same thing for an airport in Denver, Colorado, United States. There's a huge airport that was built outside Denver, and 30 years ago, it was considered overkill. So let's just acknowledge that this upfront investment is often unpopular. We shouldn't be surprised by discipline that is unpopular. We can talk about any form of discipline in our lives, individual, team-oriented. Discipline is often unpopular, but the benefits later are really popular.
While you were telling about everything we need to be able to start this project on next Monday, I was thinking about, do I know who are those 10 people? Do I know the skills of everyone in my team? Is that knowledge available easily to find out what are the talents, how busy they are, what are they looking for to learn? And so even to create this team and to identify those people, I should have some information available. You spoke about the unpopularity of documentation. Maybe the word documentation is not the best one because that brings some idea of bureaucracy, and bad bureaucracy, by the way, because we can talk about good bureaucracy and bad bureaucracy, but that's the importance of having information. to know what your business is, to know what you're doing, what are your projects running, who is in your team, what are your products, how does this situation impact your processes, your products, your business rules, and everything. And all those information, sometimes people don't see the value of them until they need it. I understand that.
So, did I let you finish? I want to let you
Yeah,
finish.
yes.
Okay. So, as you're talking, Fabricio, the phrase that comes to comes to mind is execution's two best friends are simplicity and transparency. So, without simplicity, what's the opposite of simplicity? VUCA. And we can talk about, well, do we want to accept and surrender to VUCA, or are we going to try to tame VUCA? So that's simplicity. Transparency. What does it mean to be transparent? And I think documentation is one unambiguous vehicle, communication channel for transparency. And imagine the other extreme. Imagine if nothing was documented. That's terrible transparency. So I think that's an important cliche from a book. I think it's from the Four Disciplines. Chris McChesney, maybe, and his cliche is execution's two best friends are simplicity and transparency.
Great. Let me bring you some questions or some comments from the audience that are joining us. So Jennifer Stein said, "Good muscle memory as a BA by studying the BA book guide," and she's telling us the path for developing this muscle memory by learning the value stream of her business, not just business analysis, but your business as well, adjusting your focus as needed. Want to comment?
Yeah. I like it. I like where she's going. I'm glad that the term muscle memory resonated with her. I agree that the BA Bach is a perfect example of scalable education, and creating the BBOC, writing a book. It can be unpopular discipline, the first edition, second edition, third edition. So why would we go to the trouble, all this effort and the editing? And well, it's because now the marginal cost to share information through books, now the marginal cost is really, really low. So the BA Bach is an excellent example of pursuing low marginal cost. And that's attractive for any business and any individuals to make things cheap and easy. But it takes a lot of upfront work, and that's why it's difficult to write a book. I'll read the rest of her comment here to see if I have another reaction. But I think muscle memory is a form of automation. I don't think that's a bad thing. In teamwork, if we know what to expect out of each other and we minimize surprises across the team, that's a strength.
Okay. I always feel like when I'm doing business analysis, sometimes I'm not even thinking I'm doing business analysis. I'm just doing. That's the idea of muscle memory, right? So we are just reacting as it was a natural reaction, but it is not natural. It was trained reaction. So we studied a lot to do that. So
yeah,
that's, and I like it, as you said, the BA Walk Guide has an approach to do business analysis that is repetitive, something that we can learn from. So
yeah,
there's a lot of people doing business analysis but have never learned, and sometimes they cannot evaluate if they're doing it well or if they could do it well. So the BA Walk Guide gives you a very well disciplined structure for framing your business analysis practices.
Yeah. So that term structure, I think, is also worth double clicking on. I understand that many business analysis professionals prefer structure, and some of them may detest and really not like structure. A softer word for structure, or if someone wanted to push against and protest structure, they may say structure is too rigid. And rigid is a really, really bad word. So I back off a little bit and I propose the term expectations. I think expectations is a valuable word for teams because at least it helps predictability. Um, we know what to expect out of each other. And I think that anything that teams do is a kind of expectation setting factory, right? As employees, as colleagues, we set expectations for each other, and then hopefully we meet those expectations. Then we set additional expectations, and then we meet those expectations. The fun term I like is a say-do ratio. Do what you say and say what you do. So I believe healthy teams are a kind of expectation setting factory. And so that's just another visual and another metaphor, because the opposite is having low expectations, or the worst case scenario is shrugging and just not holding ourselves to any sort of expectation. That is VUCA, and that's really what I'm passionate about taming and combating. I think plenty of innovation professionals are willing to surrender to VUCA. Um, and my hypothesis is different. I believe that through the metaphors of the performing arts and the metaphor of this expectation setting factory, we absolutely can tame VUCA. And that's valuable for our customers. It's valuable for our sanity, our mental health. But I'll pause. Am I making sense?
I believe you do. There's an interesting comment here. I would like to hear from you your perspective on that, if you agree or not. It's a LinkedIn user. I sorry your name didn't appear here. If you want to write it down, we can realize who you are. Sometimes this is a bug in our system. I'm sorry. This is very similar to disaster recovery planning. So when we are talking about reacting to some situation that's happening, we are nimble when we have planned enough and know enough so that we can pivot when the surprises come.
Yeah.
Is this correct, or is
Yeah.
there something different between being nimble and having a disaster recovery plan?
So I think they are very similar. The person's comment, I find myself nodding a lot. What came to my mind to play yes and is that there's a difference between speed, acceleration, and low cost. And so that over the last couple of weeks, as I read the IIBA report, and Fabricio, as I listened to your other guests, the word speed came up. Great. Hi, Andy. The word speed came up several times. But if Agile was all about speed, it would be called speed. If nimble was simply about speed, it would be called speed. So there are different words, I think, that are worthwhile to label these different methodologies, and disaster recovery planning does have something to do with it. So back from like physics and calculus when I was in college, there's a difference between there's a definition for speed, and the definition of velocity is the speed in which you change position or place. And acceleration is the speed in which you change your speed. So that's why I like the metaphor of a hockey player. A hockey player is ready to accelerate and then decelerate and turn, constantly changing their speed. But if I'm a skier and I'm flying down a hill at 60, 70 miles an hour and I can't stop, I'm going fast, but I'm not nimble because I have no prayer of turning or slowing down. So I think there's an important distinction there between speed and acceleration. So Agile reacted to something in the mid and late 90s where project teams had their go live events too far apart. And if there's one, and if I just pick one variable that Agile changed, it said those go live events too risky, too far apart. Let's bring the go live events closer. So Agile tackles the dimension of frequency. Nimble is not about speed. Being nimble is about acceleration, the speed in which you change your speed. And the reason why I'm I distinguish elegance in my book is because elegance is about minimal marginal cost. So again, it's another variable as you try to either mathematize or reduce the ambiguity about, well, wait, when we talk about agile, is it about speed? Not exactly. Is nimble just about speed? Not exactly. So I would ask the audience to consider those three. Those are three different things. Agile tackles frequency. Nimble tackles acceleration, and my materials are tackling low marginal cost. And I just this is where I went when I saw the phrase disaster recovery planning is how fast can you accelerate. And if you're a hockey player and another player is coming at you, that could be a disaster. And so the other fun analogy is running with the bulls in Spain. And so what an image for being nimble is running with the bulls, constantly changing direction, constantly changing speed. And if I got any more long-winded, I'd start talking about switching costs, but I'll stop there. Fabricio.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the ideas that you brought. I like the idea of the minimum marginal cost. I will ask you to delve into a little bit. I'm not how completely sure that the change of acceleration reflects nimble idea very precisely, but it's an interesting one. So being able to decelerate or accelerate more is an idea of still is an idea of movement, and that's what I'm not very sure about this analogy. If the nimbleness would not be related to our ability of movement, but with the results that we get at the end. So a surprise came, and I was able to deal with that well, very fastly, and they took the best decision. So I was nimble. How did I do that? Doesn't care. So did I use an agile approach? Maybe. Did I use a predefined methodology? I'm not sure. So I was able to understand what was coming. I was able to use my knowledge. I was able to, and nimble is not defining the way. That's the point. Nimble is just saying, "Oh, you did it. You were nimble. Nice. How did you do it?"
No, I think you can. Is it okay that I interrupt?
Yes, for sure. Come.
So you make two. I'm going to echo back the first point you just made. Is that what your point was? Is at the time when you pivoted, your recent speed did not matter. You could have been going slow. You could have been going fast. What mattered was your ability to go from one velocity, one direction, to a different velocity, to a new, improved, smarter place. And the duration in which it took you, if you were not nimble, let's say it took you 3 weeks to get your team positioned in the right direction versus 3 hours. That's nimble. If you can pivot from one direction and one speed to a different direction and a different speed, think like a hockey player. And you can do that within a split second on the ice, or you can do that within hours of a team, that's nimble. But that is acceleration, and that is mostly independent of your recent speed. Is that fair?
Okay, or even how you did it. The fact that you did it is showing that you're nimble. How you do it, that's another story. It's probably important for you. It's important to understand how you do it, but you're nimble because you did it. There's an additional point here. Let's say that I could create a new team in 3 hours and put them to work in a different direction, but it was the wrong direction.
Okay.
I would say I was not nimble because I was fast.
Well,
and I did not deal with the change precisely. I was not able to clearly understand what was going on. I was just reacting like a crowd. I don't know, just reacting very
Yeah.
fastly. That's not
VUCA.
like crazy. Oh, we have
Frantic.
to change everything.
Right.
That's not
Right.
being nimble. That's just being frenetic.
Yes. 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 Yes.
And so the right direction is part of the
Yes.
of this idea of being nimble.
But I'm going to call that quality, and I think nimble emphasizes speed of changing your speed, quality and integrity of your decisions. I think that it's important, of course, but I would argue that's a different topic. And the quality of decisions, you have to decide what is the right amount of friction, right? You mentioned earlier bureaucracy. So there's a such thing as too much friction, too many cooks in the kitchen, bureaucracy. And then the other extreme is too few cooks in the kitchen, a silo. So just being conscious that these two extremes are often not good, well, then what is the approximate optimal friction? And I think that's a valid and valuable topic. We can go there. When you asked me a bit ago about minimal marginal cost, the two words are laboriousness and latency. And latency also ties into being nimble and acceleration, because latency is the amount of time it takes for information to travel from here to here. And so when I talk about an elegant team, it is about minimizing marginal cost in terms of laboriousness, so effort, and latency, time. So that shouldn't surprise anyone. But also elegance aims to minimize surprises. It's one thing to minimize your switching cost and say, hey, for us to pivot, it took us 90 minutes and it took 90 minutes of effort, and we pivoted very quickly. But then ask yourself, what would it mean to be like nimble gone too far? What if you were experiencing pivots like running of the Bulls or a hockey player constantly getting, beat up on the ice? You have to decide what is your tolerance for surprises. And I think if IIBA comes out with another study or plays yes and to this report, I think that would be another valuable path. It's one thing to be tolerant of surprises and be able to pivot inexpensively. It's a different skill to actually minimize the number of surprises. Again, keeping your switching costs low. So I kind of jumped around 2 or 3 different topics.
No, tolerance of surprises, that relates to some conversation we had last week here with Sonia Dunier, talking about complexity, and we cannot understand all the variables available in complexity. So it's not, there is no such a recipe to deal with a complex situation, different from complicated or simple. In a simple, we already have a very well written recipe for that. In a complicated, you can develop a sequence of acts that will solve the problem. In a complexity situation, you just have to see what is going on and probe your hypotheses, create some hypotheses, and try to run. I want to bring that idea about disaster recovery and surprise. When I have a disaster recovery plan and something happens, it's not a surprise. I was hoping for that.
Wait a minute. You're hoping for the disaster?
In some case, like energy could come down or a hurricane come. So if I have a disaster recovery for hurricanes, I'm waiting for a hurricane. It's not a surprise. I just don't know when it's coming, but I know it can come, and I have a plan for it.
Okay.
Does that make sense for you?
Yeah, where my mind was going was rehearsal. It's one thing to be nimble, you want to rehearse the plan. I mean, but do you want the hurricane? Do you want the damage? I'm hesitant to agree that I'm praying for a hurricane to happen.
No, no, that's not the point. The point is, it's not a surprise.
Oh,
If you
yeah,
li-
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
if you live in Florida, a
yeah,
hurricane is not a
yeah.
surprise.
Agreed, agreed. Yeah, 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 yeah.
It's a surprise if a hurricane comes in São Paulo. We don't have disaster
Right,
recoveries for hurricanes here because
right, right, right,
we
right, right,
don't.
right.
That would be a surprise, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But even the pandemics, a lot of organizations were waiting for this kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah,
Before COVID, we have SARS, we
yeah,
have the birds fever and
yeah,
other kind of pandemics, and we are waiting for another, right? So you should
yeah,
have a plan for this.
yeah.
It's not really a surprise.
Agreed. I apologize. I misunderstood, and I'm with
Yeah,
you.
yeah. What is a surprise? It's something you don't have a plan for it. You don't have a recovery plan for one of
Yeah,
our products being so
yeah,
well received by the market that you don't
yeah,
have any more supplies to provide it.
yeah,
That's a surprise, a good
yeah,
one, right? But
yeah,
but
yeah. Positive. That's another fascinating topic: is how to minimize negative surprises and go pursue and explore the positive surprises. That's another great topic.
and you should. That's where I see nimble more than in disaster recovery,
Mm,
because like a hurricane, for example, we do have a plan. We can rehearsal. It's mechanics.
mm,
Someone had to create that plan. Maybe the person who created the plan have some style, but the rest of us just follow the plan. But what what to do when we don't have a plan, right?
yeah,
And you told about creating this structure to be ready. There's a comment from Caroline here.
yeah,
I want to bring. You can't just skip the hard work, but it's better to do it before the surprise,
yeah.
so you can respond to it with lower cost and higher effectiveness.
Yeah.
So can you discuss a little bit what is this hard work that we should be doing in our organizations? Should be ready for surprises.
Training, rehearsal, drills. The other phrase that came to my mind, the word blind spots. How many organizations have blind spots? Do you surrender to your blind spots or do you go pursue them? I think it's worthwhile to go find your blind spots before they find you. So her comment about that upfront work, it can be overkill, it can be demonized or labeled paranoid or overkill. There's a saying about a pandemic. I wish I could remember the government official who said it, but everything you do in preparation of a pandemic appears paranoid, and everything you do after the pandemic breaks out is labeled neglectful. And so it's a lose-lose situation. But I respect the point that this government official was saying, that it can be unpopular to put all these things in place before the surprise happens. And so I liked, was her name Caroline?
Caroline, yes.
Yeah. Could you even put her comment back up? Yeah, you cannot skip the hard work. That is what's unpopular. The hard work is unpopular. It gets demonized. It's labeled paranoid or overkill. Yeah, I can only just nod and agree with what she says. It's better to do it before the surprise. Here's another cute phrase. The time to fix your roof is when the sun is shining. The time to dig your well is before you're thirsty, right? The time to build your professional network is before you need a new job. But these things aren't free, right? And when she mentions lower cost, I believe what she's referring to is low marginal cost. The hard work up front is sizable. It can be significant upfront cost, right? Right. When we met in Leuven and Amsterdam last year, we were able to take an inexpensive train ride. Think of how expensive train systems are. So for us to be nimble and to move a large number of people at scale all over Europe, that's not free. And so to Caroline's point, you cannot skip the hard work of building train tracks.
There is another comment from Indy here.
Mm.
Disaster recovery planning is part of risk management. As BAs, we need to understand the risks of making the change, whether the risk is positive or negative. So, talking about positive risks that we mentioned as well. So,
Yeah. I don't know that I have a response. I'm just nodding and agreeing, of course.
okay. So, when you talk about the marginal cost and preparing, I would like to hear from you. How do you see agile methodologies and frameworks? And I know that you discussed that a little bit in your book, and you talk about the next stage for agile organizations or for organization. What's coming next after agile? Would
Yeah.
you say that there are some misconceptions in agile, being this idea of neglecting some costs of infrastructure, of information, or of documentation as one of them? How do you see uh, the current state of agile, and how can agile help organizations in the future to become more nimble?
So I will refrain from talking too much about the past of Agile, but I will point out that Agile had to evolve. It right, the manifesto reacted to whatever was going on in the mid and late 90s. We had Agile. And then there was a discipline called disciplined Agile, hinting that something before it was less than disciplined. And then there was scaled Agile, which hints that something before it was not so scalable. And now we have business agility, which hints that something prior was less than, it neglected the business. So that's all fine. But Fabrizio, with your specific question, I believe that two forces that will shape teamwork. The first are cost pressures. I believe that organizations are going to continue to be, this is a provocative term, they're going to be cheap in certain ways. They're going to try to save money. And so what does that mean for the cost profile of teams? And cost, you have to distinguish upfront cost from marginal cost. And as the intensity of innovation increases, companies are going to have the financial incentive to reduce marginal cost. That is not free. So it's going to have upfront costs increase. So the first market force that I see, I'm not going to say it's shaping Agile. I'm going to say it shapes innovation teamwork.
Good.
Our cost pressures. The second market force that I see is fewer silos, and it's the integration of different roles. So right now, so I weave in and out of IIBA and the change management arena, ACMP, and project managers, PMI. The exasperation, how professionals want the professions to evolve, to be more strategic, to be less laborious. These three professions are having the exact same conversation. And one of the observations or conclusions is that the integration of these roles is still insufficient. They're too siloed. BAs are here, change managers are here. They're both often feeling threatened. I've seen webinars over the last few years entitled, "Is there space for a BA in Agile? Does Agile welcome change managers?" These are the same conversations. So I believe that the market force is integration of these roles, where the role boundaries among BAs, change managers, and project managers, I believe that the role boundaries are going to be blurred because the silos are causing problems. I'll leave it at that.
There's a comment here from Indy that she says the implementation on the implementation perspective, DevOps is the same conversation as well. So
Yeah.
people wants to be more strategic. People wants to develop this ability to understand business, to not just be task execution
Yeah, and
driven.
and
Right?
DevSecOps because the issue of cybersecurity can no longer be in the periphery, right? So I hear DevOps less. I hear DevSecOps because you cannot silo cybersecurity. To go back to the performing arts, I believe there is value in writing the story of where is a hacker, where is a bad faith actor disrupting your customer experience, disrupting your user experience. And so I would say information security, the CISO, Chief Information Security Officer. I'm going to an event later this week entitled, Why Would You Want to Be a CISO? So this is another profession that I think cost pressures and the importance of integration. The cute phrase is, does the right hand know what the left hand is doing? So I believe that there will be increased integration, listening, and empathy among all of these roles because it's too expensive to be siloed.
None of
You have
those
blind spots.
professions should be siloed. Uh, I'm not sure if any profession should be siloed, but let's say that if you are someone who paint walls, you can be siloed just painting your walls, right? But if you're a change manager, you're changing something with a lot of people. If you're a project manager, you're leading a project, managing a lot of different people with different connections. If you are dealing with security, as you said, you cannot silo security because security is in every corner. And I like business analysis in that perspective because, of course, it could not be siloed, but it brings a perspective for all those professions. It brings the perspective of looking into the business and leaving your silo. So from all those different professions, I believe business analysis is the one that helps better how to leave your silo and look for the business as a whole. So understand who are your stakeholders, what are their expectations, what are their needs, and including the other professionals in those stakeholder lists and understanding their perspectives. Business analysis should not be siloed as well, right? Someone could do business analysis as a business analyst professional. I'm not saying that the business analyst is not important, but I believe the business analyst should help people to do business analysis in the whole organization, helping people to understand the connections.
I think that business analysts are uniquely qualified to heighten empathy among stakeholders. Change managers might focus on empathy of the team or employees, and I believe business analysts have a unique strength to be empathetic about current customers, future customers, because that really is the seed of innovation is customer empathy. Fair
enough. And I'm trying to connect those dots here. So we're saying that business analysis is a skill set. Let's use this word. I don't know, mindset or other, but let's use skill set.
It's mechanics, muscle memory. It's a skill set. All of these, yes.
Yes, mechanics. That's the mechanics I have to develop and I have to invest. And I asked you, what should an organization invest to be able to be nimble in the future? And you said training. So training these mechanics, training this way of thinking is important, and developing these information knowledge base that should be available to take decisions when you need. So if you have to understand what are your projects, what's your organization doing, who is in your organization, what are the skills, you will be in bad shape. So you have to invest on it upfront to have a low marginal cost in the future. And the BA skills will help you to break the silos. Am I connecting the idea?
I love that. I can jump in now, or I can wait.
Please jump.
Okay. So so yes to everything you just explained. Let's talk about communication channels. And when teams get themselves into trouble, the cliche is, well, we just didn't communicate well. No kidding. Let's turn the screws a little bit to understand what can we do differently that is unambiguous? I believe it's difficult to turn the screws and be extremely unambiguous about meeting etiquette, and email etiquette. These are critical skills for all innovation professionals. And so hopefully, everyone hearing us right now understands the importance of improving your meeting facilitation skills, your meeting participation skills, and how to use email effectively. The unpopular communication channel is structured documentation. So my plug for structured documentation is that at some point downstream in your innovation, you have code and you have data. These are very structured things. These are ruthlessly structured things. So a business analyst, I believe, helps their skills when they understand upstream from the code, at what point is the information that we're collaborating on, at what point is structure worthwhile? So it could be project-specific documentation. It could be cross-project documentation. But I believe these are underinvested and neglected skills among business analysts for whatever reason. But I believe that is a skill that may not be very popular, but the skills to know exactly what is worth putting on paper so that teams can collaborate and debate ideas, have a boxing ring of ideas on the page versus the boxing ring of people and personalities. So that's another reason why I'm very pro. I encourage structured documentation, because that transparency and visibility reduces marginal costs. Your future team thanks you, but also the debates between team members happens on the page instead of personalities. But business analysts need to know what is worth structuring. Is your work worth documenting, or the opposite extreme? Would you purposely say this work thoughtfully we will avoid putting on paper? Am I making sense?
I believe you do, but I have some doubts looking for the past. And I would say that the last 20 years, we changed it from a very well structured documentation wave to an unstructured one.
Yeah.
So when in the last years of the 90s, we usually organizations were investing a lot in CMM and maturity models in UML. So there was a very structured way of documenting, and you and I are old enough to have lived this wave. Right?
And those go live dates were months and years apart. So I just want to distinguish the decision to document or not document is a different decision than to have our projects large or small, monolithic or small. And what does it mean? How can we be nimble enough to be transparent, emphasize documentation, and still keep our projects small?
Right.
We don't have enough time today for that.
About Agile doing a bad thing, thinking that there's no documentation. Maybe you don't need so much documentation entering a sprint, but you should have documentation leaving a sprint, or as you build your product using a Scrum knowledge, you should also build your knowledge bases. So you're not just building a product, you should be building knowledge bases related to the work you do, to the product you're building, and usually documentation are neglected.
Yeah. Can I add another fun metaphor about comprehensive documentation?
Okay.
Let's take an example of a restaurant. Fabricio, if you and I are leading a restaurant and it's small, it's tiny, 2 dishes, we only serve 2 dishes. We have 2 customers a day, and this restaurant is only going to be open for 2 weeks. What's worth documenting? Well, whatever is worth reducing marginal cost or reducing the TCO, the total cost of ownership. So if we're a tiny restaurant and the scale, the intensity of food is low, then a written menu is overkill. But as we increase the size, increase the intensity and the scale of our restaurant, at what point do we reach a tipping point to say, now delivering expectations for our customers or having servers explain all the things on the menu? At what point is there a tipping point to say, and let's just pick some numbers, Fabricio. Let's say it's 50 dishes, 50 diners, and we're going to keep this restaurant open for 50 weeks. We're going to keep this restaurant open a year. Now, I would argue the upfront cost of a written menu is worthwhile because it reduces the marginal cost that every time I meet another customer, another diner, I can transfer my knowledge. I can transfer my knowledge with low marginal cost. So I don't promote comprehensive documentation. I promote whatever documentation makes sense to reduce your marginal cost. The more intense your innovation is, and the more stakeholders you have the financial incentive to put things on paper. If the pace and the intensity and the size, the number of stakeholders that you have is small, like if you have 2 team members, you have 5 customers, and you're only going to be, then why at that point, why even code? That would be the most absurd extreme. Is if you are low scale, you don't need keystrokes. Just it's a chat. It's improv.
It makes a lot of sense. It's not about much documentation. It's about valuable documentation,
Yeah.
and this valuable have to relate about cost benefit
Yes.
of documentation or whatever work you're doing. You have to validate this cost benefit
to reduce surprises, and with the restaurant menu as well. It helps you be nimble. A restaurant menu helps you be nimble with your customers because maybe you're missing an ingredient. It's Friday night and a certain dish was popular. A restaurant, the documentation helps you be nimble. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, it helps you to transfer the information quicker than having to create every time. And you're just talking about the menu, but you have the recipes, you have a lot of process design and a lot of definitions that should be made in your restaurant as it grows. And being able to evaluate the level of upfront work versus marginal costs. You should be doing that every day.
Reducing laboriousness should be popular. Reducing latency should be popular. But it's not free. It's not easy, because if it was, everyone would be doing it. So do you have the discipline? If you're a restaurant, as your restaurant grows, do you have the discipline to put your menu, to create a written menu? I think that it can be a helpful, straightforward, familiar metaphor, so that we have pragmatic ways to decide what's worth documenting versus what's just a chat. Some things are worth documenting. Some things, and when your work isn't worth documenting, maybe do it at the pub.
I guess you touched the point that probably nimble should be seen as a good investment, is that there is no such a silver bullet that will solve every problem. It's not about documenting everything or documenting nothing. It's about understanding your context and identifying what's the best option for you in that specific situation in your business, understanding that. I know that you have written a book, and we are almost ending our time, and I would like you to tell our audience where they can find it and how your book will help them to solve these kind of questions that we're making right here. If they have their own organizations and they want to deal with surprises, as you said, and deal with in a nimble way, how does your book could help them, and how can they find your book?
Thank you, Fabricio. So I self-published through Kindle Digital Processing, Amazon, and Ingram Spark, which should have worldwide distribution. So recently, when I spoke to the IIBA Philippines chapter, we concluded that they would also be able to get my book. I'm often asked, who is your target audience? And my super succinct response is exasperated innovation professionals. I believe that there are a, a big number of innovation professionals who are exasperated with their status quo. And the cliche that fits here is nothing will change until your status quo is more painful than a transition. There are innovation professionals who are not exasperated and their status quo is absolutely fine. Then skip my book. But if you are sufficiently exasperated with your current culture, with VUCA, if your project success rates are not great, I believe that this book and the Elegance methodology will help you become more disciplined, more empathetic. It is a people-centric methodology. The code is going to be fine. The data is going to be fine. So that would be my explanation for why it can be helpful, is because it gives you familiar metaphors to imitate, for your team to imitate. And these metaphors, an expectation setting factory, a symphony, a dance couple, theater, improv, these metaphors are already in our vocabulary. We're already using words like, are we singing from the same hymnal? Are we in sync? We talk about customer story. So, over the last 10 years, as we've heard these conversations, these conversations include a little bit about the performing arts. What my books do is say, you gave me an inch, I'm going to take a mile. And so the books really, really lean into symphony, partner dancing, theater, improv, the art of parenting, and the martial art of Aikido. And so my hope is that it will improve project success rates, it will improve the employee experience, and it will absolutely tame VUCA. But I'm only one person, so over the next few years, I hope business analysts will troubleshoot, critique my books, help me make it better. This is about making the world a better place, innovating more, reducing our worldwide innovation backlog. The world has an innovation backlog, and by reducing the laboriousness, reducing the latency of our collaboration, I think the world might be ready for a people-centric methodology. The code is going to be fine.
Thank you very much, Robert. So I will, if you're watching this video later on YouTube, I will put a link for Robert's book right below us. Otherwise, just go to Amazon and look for Innovation Elegance or Robert Snyder, so you can find it. Robert, thank you for coming. It was a great pleasure to have you here.
Back at you, Fabrizio. Very fun, and just congratulations on your whole series. I think I'm guest 6 of 7, so I will be there in the gallery, even if LinkedIn keeps me anonymous. But congratulations on your whole series, and IIBA, congratulations on the report. This moves the frontier. That's what we're all trying to do here, is move the frontier, because the status quo is not acceptable. And so I'm delighted to be. I hope I'm on the frontier with you, Fabrizio and IIBA.
Thank you, Robert. And I will end with that because you ended very coolly. Please stay after the show ended. And for our guests, for our folks that were watching us, thank you for joining us. See you next week. Bye-bye.